Hi, I'm Beth, creator of Dry It, Can It, and today I want to talk to you about freeze-drying mashed potatoes, how I do it and how I rehydrate it. So I have here 2 trays of mashed potatoes that are now freeze-dried. So to prepare these, basically I took and mashed potatoes. Now, I did not use anything but water in these. In other words, I did not flavor them with salt or milk or butter. You definitely can put in salt if you want to. Keep in mind these will become very concentrated once the salt is in there, which is okay because you're going to rehydrate them. Milk is fine because milk freeze dries really well. A little bit of butter you probably could reasonably do if you're not putting these in for long term, but butter is fat and fat can and will go rancid after a period of time. So I chose to do my mashed potatoes just plain mashed. So what I did is I cooked them. I actually peeled them, I cooked them, I mashed them. This is somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds of mashed potatoes before they were freeze-dried. So they shrink up a little bit, they're done. I checked the weight on them several times, and then I want to bag these up, and then I'll show you how I rehydrate these. Now, what I did is I put together a contraption with separate parts that I found online. And my contraption's not perfect. Sometimes the jars are not tall enough, so then I'll put some books or some pans or something there so I can get this on here. But this works really well because it'll hold a whole tray full of the food. So the potatoes, as you can see, I can just really pull off in sheets, and then I can break them and get them in the jar. Now I'm going to have to break these pieces up, and my goal really is to get this into a powder. And I'm using gloves simply because my hands are going to have moisture in them. And I'm going to put as much into this jar as I can. And then what I typically do is I use a wooden spoon to kind of break this up a little bit. So just like so, and I just sort of mash it in there. And that basically gets it into smaller pieces. Now once I have this in jars and contained, I actually will put this in a food processor to make a powder. And I do that primarily because it's going to take a lot less room than if I leave the pieces in chunks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jar up the rest of this. I'm going to powder it, and then I'll be back to show you how I reconstitute the potatoes. So stay tuned. So I have 1 jar of the potato all powdered, and I left a little bit of room in this. And the reason I did that is because oftentimes when you're using something to powder, it introduces heat, which could in turn introduce moisture. So while I don't generally condition freeze-dried food, when I do powder, I generally will do that. And so I'm just going to check this every day for 4 to 7 days until I know that there's no moisture in this. And I have this sealed with a mason jar, not with an oxygen absorber or anything, but with a lid that has the rubber gasket around it to keep it moisture proof. Now I also want to show you real quickly how I work to keep the food dry in the meantime. So I do have a cover on my jar right now, and that's to keep moisture from going into or be the food that's already in the jar, getting the moisture. With a potato, I broke this, I put this in a plastic bag, and then I used a rolling pin to kind of break up the pieces a little bit. Now, if you don't have a food processor or some kind of a blender, you can absolutely store your freeze-dried potatoes in chunks. It's just that it's going to take a little bit more room. That's not a big deal. But I think a food processor probably would have worked a little bit better with this because some of these chunks are a little bit difficult to get done in this particular unit. But this is my go-to unit, and it holds a cup, which is why I really like it. I keep everything in my bag sealed. So this is the process, and I'm just going to go through this right now. So I just take my funnel, and because I know that my cup in here is a 1-cup measuring cup, I just go ahead and I scoop up a cup of the potato that I have in here and put that inside of my cup like so. But I immediately seal this bag to keep the moisture out. Then I put the potato in here like so. It comes over the top just a little bit, and I'll just use a wooden spoon to push that in there. I put the cover on, and then I'm going to start this and I'm going to shake it simply to get those drops in there. So while I do that, know that this is not 100%, and a food processor would work, a rolling pin would work. Again, storing it whole would be fine too. So I take this out, and I still have one bigger chunk in here than I want. So I'm just gonna take that out. I could probably smash that with my spoon a little bit. And I'm just gonna put that back into my bag. Again, seal my bag. But I have a powder, still has a couple chunks in it. I come over here, I remove the lid, I dump my powder, and I put my lid back on. Now this may seem tedious to you, and I understand that. Again, I'm working with a small blender, but at the same point in time, it's really important to remember that your dehydrated and especially your freeze-dried food is very hygroscopic. It's going to pick up moisture really fast. If this was something with sugar, it works, it really picks up fast. So I'm just going to continue this until I'm done, which is just going to be 2 more blends. And then I will be back to show you how I rehydrate the potato. I completed blending and powdering my potato. Now again, I had 10 to 12 pounds of potato to start with, mashed it, freeze-dried it, and this is what I have left really. About a quart, maybe and probably a pint. I did take a 1/4 cup of powdered potato out, and I'm going to rehydrate that. I do have some milk and some water combined, and I'm heating that in my microwave, and I will be right back with that. Now, let's see how to rehydrate this. Mashed potatoes are something you're going to eat warm, maybe even hot. What I did is I combined some water and milk. Because I have a 1/4 cup of mashed potato, dehydrated mashed potato, and because I didn't have any milk in it, I just had water, I added about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half of milk, and then the rest water up to the 1/4 cup, so I have the same amount. I may or may not use all of that because if it's a humid day, some of that moisture will have already been absorbed in here. So I'm going to add most of that, but not quite all of it, and I'm going to give it a stir. And I'm going to have mashed potatoes fairly quickly. Now, that not having all of it showed me that it really was not quite hydrated all the way. Now, usually this is going to come pretty close to a 1-to-1 ratio. And that really is where I am at. So I'm just going to let that sit for about a minute. In the meantime, I'm just going to give it a sprinkling of salt. Because remember, I didn't put any salt in my potatoes to start with. I definitely could add some butter at this point. I could have melted the butter with the milk and the water. I'm going to give that another quick stir. And just like that, I have mashed potatoes. Now, are these a little thicker than I want? Yeah, they probably are. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit more water. Again, it's winter here and it's pretty dry. So I'm going to add just a little bit just to loosen these up a little bit. And then I have a good potato. So the advantage of this is it's great for making a shepherd pie, for having mashed potatoes in a hurry. And I have potatoes that are perfectly hydrated, just like that. And they taste good. I will say that having blended them, they taste just a tiny bit rubbery. But I think if you had gravy or this was something else, you're not going to know the difference. A lot of times if you over mix your potatoes, for example, if you mash them in a blender, they will taste a little bit rubbery. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit more water to loosen that up a little bit because I don't want rubbery potatoes. And I would be really disappointed if for some reason these turned out that way. That made the difference. So if your potatoes are a little bit rubbery, add a little bit more moisture. They're probably just a little bit dry yet, but this works out really well. So anytime you dehydrate potatoes, you do need to make sure you blanch them at a minimum first or they will turn black. Again, these were freeze-dried, they were fully cooked, they were mashed. So, hopefully you got some ideas. Thumbs up if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel in the lower right corner if you want to get some more tips. And I thank you for watching.